Welcome everyone. My name is Carolina and I'm a Sustainability Officer here at Wyndham City Council. I'd like to start by recognising Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples as the first custodians of the lands on which Australia was founded. Council acknowledges the people of the Kulin Nation as the traditional owners of the lands on which Wyndham City is being built. Thanks for joining us for this workshop, Reducing Your Energy Without Spending a Cent, as part of the Energy Smart Homes program. All workshops in the Energy Smart Homes program have great information for Wyndham households, owners or renters, so no matter what your budget, we'll have some information to help you reduce your energy and save money. If you'd like to book an upcoming workshop, I'll add the link to the Energy Smart Homes website now. If you've missed any workshops, we'll be adding recordings on the website too. And as an added bonus, and to support you through your Energy Smart Homes journey, over the next 3 months, Wyndham residents can also get free energy advice from the Australian Energy Foundation. I'll also add a link to their website where you can book a free energy consultation. And now I'll pass you on to Jo Taranto from Good for the Hood, as she provides some tips and tricks to reduce your energy without spending a cent. Also, I might just remind everyone, we'll be recording this session. So if you don't want to be famous in the video recording, I'll advise you to switch off your camera.
Wonderful. Thank you, Carolina. And thank you so much to everyone who's joined us this evening. My name is Jo Taranto, and I am the co-founder and managing director of Good for the Hood, a social enterprise based in Sydney. And we love talking all things sustainability. We are really passionate about waste, energy, and working with communities, particularly to help them create powerful change, which is hopefully lifelong, and to help us all tackle the challenges that we face when it comes to some of the big planetary problems. So the aim, as Carolina said, today is to understand a little bit about emissions. If you've missed a couple of the other sessions, or if you're just not sure what this greenhouse gas emission thing is, we're going to cover it really broadly, and then talk about what's coming out of our homes when it comes to our residences and our communities and suburbs. Where are the emissions coming from? And then how can we have a plan that will help reduce our impact? Now, the brief I was given was that I need to give you tips and tricks that won't cost you anything. So it's quite an exciting brief, and certainly been a challenge, because as you can imagine, we can do weird and wonderful things when we've got lots of cash. But when we're talking about just changing the behaviours or the things that we do within our homes, it's a little bit less straightforward. However, it is no less powerful. So stick with me tonight and you'll learn some ways in which you can reduce not only your greenhouse gas emissions, but ultimately the amount of money you're spending on your energy bills. And anyone who's paying, for energy bills will know that it's not a cheap expense. It's not a little thing. So, so hopefully that you'll find there's a real value in that this evening. I am on Wallumattagal land up in the edge of the Eora and Darug Nations in Sydney, and I live in a suburb called Ryde, and it is not as big as the suburbs around the areas you live in, but there are a lot of similarities in our areas, and one of them is that we're an area of immense growth, and I certainly know that Wyndham City is in a position of huge growth as well. So I certainly know that if anything, we're going to be creating more emissions and spending more on our energy as our houses get bigger, as our communities get bigger. And certainly that's all the more reason that we should be looking at these things. My experience with this is I have done a little bit of work with the wonderful Craig Newcastle and ABC television around waste and also emissions reduction. So we were some of the impact partners for the War on Waste television series and Fight for Planet A. And we have 2 free toolkits on our website about how to tackle waste reduction and also community emissions reduction. So if you're really inspired after today's session, there's some really great free resources there. If you've missed Craig's chat that Carolina talked about before, it's available to watch as well, and certainly some great insights there from him. And as I said, Good for the Hood are a social enterprise, and we are all about inspiring people to take steps towards community change, whether that's in your own household, on your street, in your business and organisations, within local charities or sporting clubs. And we're really inspired because every day we get to see amazing people do amazing things, often because they care about the planet, but sometimes just because they care about each other, and there's a great side effect of environmental benefit too. So we talk with councils all over Australia, and we're really grateful to be in your neck of the woods tonight. When we talk about good, we talk about what's good for people, what's good for place and planet, but also what's good for the economy. Not for making profit, but for financial sustainability as well. And certainly we will be touching on that tonight. You should walk away with a plan to be able to save some cash and reinvest it in other parts of the economy. And when I said a hood, that can be anything. It can be small, it can be your home, it can be your community, it can be the people in your suburb, streets. We work with people in co-ops, people in organisations. So, you know, you're a part of more of those than you probably realise, and you have an immense capacity to make change within those as well. So we're going to talk about why. Why do we bother talking about emissions? What's the big deal? What's the problem? And certainly, you know, in terms of the context of what you're doing in your community, why does it matter? Now, we certainly know that greenhouse gas emission reduction is all about creating a climate safe future. That's what I like to talk about. I don't like talking about climate action or climate change so much. This is about our safety. This is about our capacity to be resilient. And this is about how we are going to create an environment where we can live safely. Now, we certainly have seen with bushfires, floods, COVID, you know, we have a lot of, and drought before that, we have a lot of factors facing us on a daily basis in Australia. This is really just a risk avoidance measure. So reducing our greenhouse gas emissions is about providing a safe future for us. Now, in terms of where we sit and why we're doing this with Wyndham Council, you have a wonderful council who's set targets for emissions reduction, which is wonderful. You've got a government, in state government, and a federal government who all have targets for emissions reduction too. But the hard part about greenhouse gas emissions is that it's invisible. It's kind of like COVID in many ways. It's a bit of an invisible enemy. We can't see it. We actually don't always know when we're creating it. And we don't know what things we do in our lives are creating the biggest impact at the biggest time. So sometimes we might think we're doing something wonderfully, and actually, you know, in the grand scheme of things, the impact of that action isn't as big as something else we could do. So today is all about trying to find the most impactful things you can do in your home so that your effort counts, and that ultimately, if it's a sacrifice you're having to make, that it's a sacrifice that's going to make a difference. So I'd firstly like to ask you all, by this poll, what you think the biggest source of greenhouse gas emissions by sector is in Australia. Now, I've just listed 4 of the big ones, and I'd love to know what you think. So your choices are transport, waste, electricity, or agriculture. If you had to take a guess at where the most emissions are coming from in Australia at the moment, based on 2019 figures, where would you think our emissions are coming from? I'll give you 5 more seconds. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Excellent. Great. So most of you said electricity, about 39%. And congratulations, if that's what you said, then you are correct. Most of Australia's emissions, or at least the vast majority, are coming from electricity. This has come from the Climate Council, and 32% of our emissions in Australia are coming from electricity. There's other types of energy, stationary energy, for example, but we're just talking about the stuff that has to come through the grid for us to run our daily lives. That includes industry as well as our homes. So when we're looking at the way that we can be the most impactful when it comes to emission reduction, one of the best things that we can do in Australia is look at our electricity and where we got our energy from. Now, when it comes to greenhouse gas emissions, we know the single biggest cause is the burning of fossil fuels to create our electricity, to create the energy in the grid. So if nothing else, you walk away with an understanding that a switch to renewable energy is what we need when it comes to electricity, then that's a win. And there's certainly something that you can explore with your energy provider by looking at a green power solution or looking at your own renewable energy sources. And I certainly know that that's going to come up in future workshops. We won't be covering renewables heavily today because generally there is a cost associated with that. But certainly we cannot continue to use fossil fuels in the same way that we have. We know that the cost of fossil fuels will also become completely uneconomical in the future. Renewables are the cheapest they've ever been, and their cost will only continue to come down. So, which is exciting for all of us. So when we look at the emissions that are coming out of your city from Wyndham, energy again is a really huge part. So that's why your council is focusing on this as part of their community emissions reduction. They want us all to play our part when it comes to reducing the electricity use and ultimately the emissions that come out of that. So, emissions hierarchy. Who's heard of the waste hierarchy? The reduce, reuse, recycle. Emissions are very similar in the fact that we have to create a hierarchy so we know how to target it. Is it best to offset first? Is it best to use renewables first? We kind of need a plan so that we know where to start. Now, and this comes down, the items at the top of the triangle are the most impactful things that you can do. Now, sometimes you'll see in this that renewables and reduction are flipped. And to be honest, that's okay. But I'm going to use what Craig Rucastle talks about here and put renewables closer to the top, and I'll explain why in a second. But the single biggest things that you can do for reducing the emissions is avoid the thing that's creating them. Now you might think, well, that sounds thoroughly boring, Joe, and you're right. And sometimes that does mean a sacrifice, sometimes completely impossible to do as well. But if there's a way that we can avoid something in the first place, obviously, like refusing the single-use packaging on a product, if we can avoid using something or avoid the emissions that are created by something in the first place, that's a really effective way of not having to deal with that cost or those CO2 emissions. The second thing we can do, and the reason I put renewables towards the top and reason that Craig Rucastle has articulated, is that a switch to renewables is a pretty permanent solution. I don't know too many people who've made a switch and then have decided they're going to go back to their old bill. So it's a much more permanent fixed solution. And as you'll see, when it comes to avoidance and reduction, they're much more behavior-based. And we know, being humans, that, you know, we don't always do the right thing, even though we know we probably should. So reduction's great, but also it's quite impermanent. You might reduce today, tomorrow you might use the heater a lot more because it's colder. So a switch to renewables will mean that no matter what you're doing in your home, that the emissions coming from that are greatly reduced or completely removed itself. And the last thing that is really recommended when you're talking about emissions reduction is offsetting. We're not going to talk about offsets today because there's a cost associated with those. But if you haven't spoken to your energy provider about their offsets, it's a really great conversation to have. You can ask them to offset your energy use if they don't already, or ask them what their policy is with offsets as well. Again, offsets are the last sort of frontier when it comes to emissions reduction. So We only do that after we've tried to avoid, renew, reduce. You'll also see that when we talk about energy reduction, and we'll look at it in a second, the hardest part of all of this is knowing where we're using our energy. So you might think, well, my house is big and I've got a lot of light, so that is definitely going to be one of the biggest factors. But how do you really know? And ultimately, I don't really know until I look at your individual situation where your items are. So if from this, one of the things that you may be able to plan to do in future is to look at some energy meters in your home. You can get them from as little as $20. That is a great option in the future. Obviously, there's a cost there, so it's not essential, but certainly if you're really interested in where you're using power from, if you have an energy meter, you can see where that power is being pulled as soon as you flick the switch. And if you're really trying to save some money, and we all obviously have needed to since COVID, it's a really effective way. Energy is not cheap, and if you know what things are pulling energy from your house, it's a very powerful decision-making tool. The other thing I'll say to that is that some of the things that go hand in hand with being a sustainable person, i.e. keeping appliances for a really long time because we know that they're still working, a lot of our old appliances are really inefficient. So sometimes you don't know until we look at that energy meter and say, wow, our fridge is really pulling so much more power than we expected it to. So because it's invisible, because it's a little bit of the unknown, knowledge is power. I'll come back. Oh, I'm going to jump in. I gave you a little sneak there. I don't know if anyone saw that, but I'm going to launch another poll. Sorry, I think I had that still sitting there. I want to think about your household and where you think emissions are coming from. So what do you think the biggest contributor to emissions in your home is from greenhouse? That question has a slight typo in it. What do you think the biggest contributor to greenhouse emissions in your home is? Is it heating and cooling, hot water, appliances, or lighting? I don't know how many of you saw the next slide. So. All right, we've got a front runner. Throughout the chat, if you'd like to ask a question, please, by all means, stick it in the chat. There will be a chance at the end as well to ask questions as well. I'm going to end the poll in 3, 2, 1. All right. Fantastic. All right, most of you said that our emissions are coming from heating and cooling, and you would be correct. So when we look at the emissions that are coming from our home, from the Department of Energy, Water and the Environment, heating and cooling accounts for about 40% of the average household's emissions. Hot water accounts for about 25%, appliances about 30%, and lighting in the average home about 5%. Is anyone surprised by that? I think for me, that was kind of like, there were some items I was a bit like, oh, I thought for sure that would be a bigger contributor, especially lighting. I'm going to talk a little bit about why these items contribute differently in a second. But as we go along and talk about each items, I want you to think about your own home and the way you use the items under those categories, and start to think about the things that you think you might be able to look at as we go along. So what we're also talking about today is no cost options versus some of the alternatives, which would be low cost or higher cost. Certainly the next 2 workshops in this series will be covering some low cost and potentially some greater solar installation, so more high cost options as well. So this is not the be all and end all by any means, but what a great way to start reducing your energy emissions. And I'll also say that some of these things are set and forget. Some of these things you can walk away tonight by setting yourself an intention and a goal to change, and you may never have to change it again, which is probably the most powerful thing, because it doesn't rely on our memories or our teenagers or our partners to comply. And some of them are more habitual changes. Some of them are things that we are maybe going to have to look at a bit more creatively. So if there is an option that you can do that's set and forget, whether it's moving furniture, putting an item down, blocking up a draft, changing the thermostat, they're more powerful potentially in some ways, because unless someone goes around and moves those, they're a lot more likely to stay as habits or part of your behavior change. All right, I've started with hot water, and you might think, Jo, this wasn't the first most impactful thing when we talked about it. It was heating and cooling. But hot water use is responsible for about 25% of our emissions and for the average household bill. And half of that is coming from our shower. So if you were to change nothing else today, the time you spend in that shower is incredibly powerful. If you watch the War on Waste, if you watch the Fight for Planet A TV show, you'll notice that Craig tackled this with 5 uni students. He did nothing else in their home, and they reduced their energy bill by 50% because they took shorter showers and they reduced the heat of their hot water. It's an incredibly powerful change. It can be a set and forget one, but it also might require a little bit of nudging and crafting when it comes to people in your family using the shower for longer. So the things that you can do to avoid emissions or energy use is to turn down the hot water thermostat. Now, I know that gas hot water is quite popular in Victoria. If you can keep your hot water to 60 degrees for a storage hot water system, or if you've got a continuous flow hot water system, you can even drop it down to 50 degrees. If you're turning your shower on, waiting for it to heat up, and then once it's hot, having to turn on a lot of cold water to make it bearable to get under, your hot water heater is too hot. To keep it safe, it needs to be at least 60 degrees if it's a storage hot water system, because it stops Legionella and other bacteria growing in it. So there's a reason we have hot water, and the reason we keep it hot enough. But if you are at risk of scalding yourself every time you get in that shower, then all you are doing is wasting the energy to heat up the water, to run through your pipes, to get to you, to mix with cold water so that you can get under it. It is an absolute waste of energy. So if nothing else, if dropping down the thermostat on your hot water system, if it's something you have no idea how to do, you're not alone. It's not impossible. Find out the model, Google it. If you don't feel comfortable and safe to do that yourself, obviously get support to do that. But it is a very simple set and forget change. It also makes it safer for kids if you've got them in the house. I certainly know it makes it easier to turn on the bath or shower and reduce the risk of scalding people. So that's a really simple solution. Now you'll see in here the more bold the item is, the more impactful it is. So if I've bolded it, then that means I want you to take notice and think about that as a potentially powerful one. Again, if you're away for any period of time, you can also turn off your hot water system. So you think while you're away, your hot water system is still heating up your hot water. That's a lot of energy just to keep it ready to use. And certainly, if you come back, there are rules around what you need to do to make sure that it gets back to the right temperature before you use it, again, because bacteria may have developed in that period. So please just make sure that you're doing it safely. But if you're going on holidays for 3 months, no one is going on holidays for 3 months, but if you go on holidays again for 3 months, turn off your hot water system. There's absolutely no reason why it should still there keeping hot water for you when you're not using it. One of the other easy things for us to do I say easy. I know it's hard for some of us who love a long hot shower, but a 3-minute shower is a very powerful action when it comes to energy and emission reduction. 3 minutes is more than enough time to wash yourself, but it certainly reduces the need for that hot water system to continue to work. If you do nothing else, turning down your hot water thermostat and having shorter showers, as I said, you can reduce the amount of your electricity bills by some cases between 30 to 50% alone, if you do nothing else. So if you're already really good at this and you're thinking, I already do that, I have really quick showers and it's not something I worry about, then great, we can move on to something else. But I hope I've reinforced that this is a very, very powerful, no cost option. When you're looking at low cost, they start talking about using low flow shower heads as well. And it's obviously something that reduces the amount of water coming through. That's not about saving water. That's actually about saving energy. So really useful one. Some of the other things you can do if you've already nailed the shower thing is cold washing your clothes. So we have got, you know, a lot of a third of our hot water emissions are coming from the laundry. And then the remainder are coming from our kitchen. So if you can use the eco setting on your dishwasher, if you can stack your dishwasher completely before turning it on, and if you can service your appliance as well, that will also keep those items running longer and save you some cost on terms of inefficiencies as well. Heating and cooling. So when it comes to emissions reduction, heating is more emissions intensive than cooling. Now, I know you're in Victoria and you do both because you need to. It gets very, very hot and it gets very cold. But generally, when it comes to emissions, our heating is more emissions intensive than our cooling. Now, there's two types of heaters that we can have in our homes when it comes to an appliance, and that's a radiant heater, which is the sort of old school, you know, with the red bars that looks like a heater, or convective, so more the sort of bar heaters that, you know, might have sort of these tubes that sit there, and you can, it's not as intensive, but it can, you know, sort of more a space heater. You obviously might have ducted heating or underfloor heating as well. When it comes to emissions, gas heaters are more efficient than underfloor heating, obviously. Underfloor heating uses an incredible amount of power. So if you do have it in your home, first of all, lucky you. Second of all, use it sparingly. Don't put it on a timer that just comes on every day, you know, at a certain time. Some people turn it on before they get home from work so that their floor's warm when they walk on it. Lovely, but it won't kill us to have to wait for it to warm up. So really, really intensive use of energy. Now, the other really interesting trick when it comes to this, and we're going to cover it in a second, is the use of ceiling fans. If you've got ceiling fans, you've got a really powerful tool for heating and cooling in your home. Now, ceiling fans are so much better than evaporative coolers or air conditioners when it comes to emissions. So if you're thinking of looking at different cooling options, then that's kind of the hierarchy. But if you've got ceiling fans, they can also be really powerful when you're heating your home too. Mechanical cooling is way less emissions intensive. Now, when you talk about the types of heaters, going back to it, it's really useful to look at, if you're just in a room and you're wanting to feel warm, a little radiant heater is great. If you're wanting to make a whole room feel warm, then more a convective heater is better. So think about what you're using the appliance for. If you've got both, is it just that you're a bit cold and you want to feel warm? Or is it that you're actually wanting the whole house to feel warm, or the whole room? Also depends on how high your ceilings are. If you're in an older home with high ceilings, you know, a radiant heater or convection heater might both be needed. One of my lovely favorite things though is using your fan to help bring some of that heated air down. So it might seem counterintuitive, but yeah, try turning on your ceiling fan really low if you've got a heated room, and it might just move some of that heated air back down before it cools and makes you feel cold again. And as we know, we should really be dressing for warmth first. So please put on your socks and jumpers and beanies and use your blankies and hoodies are a great thing. If you've got one of those ridiculous slankets or blankets, put it on. You know, to be honest, if you're trying to just keep yourself warm on the couch watching TV, load up with that stuff first before you turn the heater on. Once you're in bed, if you're cold, don't put the heater on, get more blankets. Not only is it dangerous, obviously, depending on the type of heater, but you know, we can stay warm in bed with the right equipment. We don't need to put the heater on. If your house is still feeling cold when you're heating it, then you might have a draft issue. And fixing a draft is a really powerful thing that we can do. If you've got a chimney in your home, if you're in a Victorian or Edwardian home, or a home from the 80s with a fireplace and a chimney, then make sure that it's not a source of a draft, because a lot of warm air can go straight up that chimney, and we're losing, and cold air can be coming down as well. Good old door sausages or socks are very powerful, and drafting out windows, if you need to use tape or something cheap just to get it cleared so that you don't have these gales coming in your room, please do that. If you don't want to go out, and we're talking about no cost, a rolled up towel is great to stick under the door. Those actions will keep the heat in the room. And, you know, as we know, heating that room is churning through the energy. Same thing for using blinds and natural light. As soon as that sun's up, your blinds should be open, or your curtains should be open. It's not just something that your mother used to insist on because she was a nag. It actually helps heat up the house quickly. And as soon as that sun starts to drop, that's when those blinds should be closed, because that cold air and warm air is going to move very quickly through that glass. And we're just going to waste energy if we're trying to heat a house that hasn't got proper window coverings. If you've got cold floors, then maybe you need a rug. Move a rug from another part of your house and keep your socks on. Again, very powerful, no cost, and might just keep you warm. I know Melbourne gets chilly. When it comes to reducing our emissions, if you are heating your home, then you really shouldn't have your thermostat set to more than 20 degrees. And you might think, that's ridiculous. I have it at least 27, and then I take all my clothes off and I walk around like I'm in the Bahamas. It's a lovely idea, but as soon as you lift your that 1 degree of that thermostat, it causes an up to a 10% increase of the emissions and the cost of running that item. 10% every time you go up a degree. So whilst you might love that feeling of just tropical warmth, you are paying for it in spades. So keep it low and just load up. You're not going to die at 20 degrees. Lots of jumpers, socks, and the same for cooling down. We really shouldn't be having our air conditioning at 18 degrees. Now, I know you can get really brutal 40+ days in Melbourne, but again, that's when you need to get those fans. So bring the air conditioning down, and then use mechanical cooling as well. Again, you use air conditioning to make it habitable, safe. It's to be comfortable, but as soon as we're dropping it down to a level below that, again, 10% increase every time. A little note, maintaining and cleaning your products. If you've got a dusty, duct or vent on a heater or cooler, it's not working as efficiently, and it's having to churn through a lot more energy to create the same impact. If you've got a heater that has a dusty reflector on the back, it can't reflect the heat back as efficiently, so it won't feel as hot. And when you are heating a room, try and close it up as much as possible to keep that warm air in. Overnight, as I said, if you're in bed, please turn your heating or cooling off. I know air conditioning in summer when you're sleeping is a beautiful luxury. And if you do have to do that, then make sure you're keeping it around that 25 to 27 degree mark. And if you've got a ceiling fan, as I said, you're a lucky human, because mechanical cooling is incredibly powerful and very, very cost effective. Lastly, if you've got a heater and you've put it in your room and it still doesn't feel warm, perhaps it's in the wrong spot. So think about the position of the heater to the rest of you. Again, if it's a radiant heater and you're not feeling that, then perhaps it's in the wrong part and it's not pointed enough at you. Or maybe it's in a doorway and every time someone walks into the room, the air moves that warm air and you'd start to feel freezing again. So just consider the position as well as the position of the thermostat. If you've got reverse cycle ducted air conditioning and your thermostat is in a space which is potentially getting more cold air or more hot air than the rest of the house, then it's going to work out that's the temperature for the rest of the house, and it might be overheating or overcooling it. Now we're going to talk about appliances. I'm going to check that there's no questions at the moment. Looking good. How are we going for time? We're going good. All right, appliances. We talk about this thing called the energy vampire, and we live in an age of very smart appliances, which pretty much stay on all the time. So certainly when it comes to appliances, one of the biggest sucker of power these days is our thing called standby. Now, I can think of at least probably 15 to 20 appliances that are on standby in my house at any one time. They can go from anything from TVs, phone chargers, coffee machines, printers. Certainly your internet is probably sitting on standby, if not fully activated at any one time. But there's a lot of appliances which are drawing power, almost 24/7. So if you're not needing to use something, and the reason we have standby power is to save time, really. It's just to keep an appliance on the ready so that when we want to use it, it's able to start straight away, which is lovely, but ultimately it's a luxury that we pay for. So we spend an awful lot of money in Australia on standby power. The government thinks that we spend at least $800 million a year in Australia because of standby power for something that we're not actually using. So on average, that would indicate that per household, we're spending about $100 a year having our appliances on standby. If you have a printer in your home and the little blue light is on all the time, turn that bad boy off. It is pulling a tremendous amount of power. It's lovely that it's there if you need to print something, but these days, less and less a requirement. So turn it off at the wall. Shut it down properly on the device and then switch it off at the wall. Then when you need to use it, you can turn it on. One of the downsides, unfortunately, with a smart house or a smarter home is that we have increasing numbers of standby appliances. Yes, they're more energy efficient. Our televisions are more energy efficient than they've ever been, but ultimately they're bigger than they've ever been as well. So, if you can turn those items off, and certainly if you're working from home, I understand that you're probably using them more, but if you're leaving the house to go to school or work or go on holidays, make sure those items are turned off at the wall. There's absolutely no reason that our appliances should be pulling power when we're not using them. When it comes to appliances, some work better when they're full and more efficiently when they're full, and some work less efficiently when they're full. So when it comes to our fridge and our washing machine and our dishwasher, as we talked about when it comes to hot water, make sure they are full. Get the most out of those machines when they are full. A fridge works much better cooling the items in there when it's full. If you don't believe me, take my word for it. It's much easier for a fridge to hold the cold temperatures in the products in there than to have to cool down that air and keep it circulating. So full fridge, full washing machine, full dishwasher before you do anything. But when it comes to heating up hot water, for the kettle, for example, if you're making a cup of tea, there's no reason why that kettle has to be completely full. I know marriages that have broken down over this issue. So please, if you're filling up the kettle for 2 cups of tea, work out what that looks like, fill it up and boil it for 2 cups. Same if you're boiling water for pasta. If you're over boiling the water that's needed, you're just using more energy to get the same result. So only use what you need for those items and you will save a little bit. Again, they're not listed there as the most efficient one, most effective ones, and we'll get to those in a sec. If you have a pool, lucky you. If you have a pool heater, that bad boy is sucking a lot of power, and we certainly know that for pool heaters, they can be costing you up to a third of your energy bill. So that's when you need to look at things like pool blankets to keep that heat in, turning the thermostat down again. Maybe you don't need it as warm as, Hawaii in summer. And then obviously switching off a pool heater when you go away. I've got a friend who heats her pool when she's away. She's like, oh, you should go over, it's really warm. I'm like, why are you heating your pool while you're on holidays? It makes no sense. So as I just said, turn off your appliances at the wall, especially printers and anything large that's pulling a lot of standby power. That is actually one of the most impactful things you can do when it comes to appliances. If you're worried about having to go around and turn off 15 appliances when you go to work, find out a way if you can put multiple items into a power board and turn one off. Line dry washing, obviously anything that uses less power completely or avoids using because you're using Mother Nature's drying capabilities is much better. And then reduce your energy use by switching to power saving mode. If you've got computers, monitors, televisions and sound systems that have that option and you need to set it, awesome. Some of them will be set automatically. And as I said, fill that washer, dishwasher, fridge and boil the kettle or the pot for only the water you need, not for, next time as well. Lastly, lighting, and I'm only going to go very lightly on this because if we're not spending a cent, there's not a lot we can do. Ultimately, LED lighting, as we know, is so efficient. It uses 80% less energy than halogen globes or other types of lights in your home. So if you've still got fluoros, if you've still got old halogen globes, obviously that would be something to focus on. But we really have beautiful homes. We live in Australia with amazing light. Natural light is your friend. And if you can't, use natural light, obviously at nighttime, think about using smaller lights. So using lamps in the lounge room when you're watching TV at night, if you're reading in your kids' room. That's why a lamp is a great thing, not just because it darkens the room and tells them it's time to go to sleep. Beyond that, obviously using your blinds again and using your windows. I'd be surprised with the amount of people who turn the light on without opening the blinds first. But beyond that, when we look at the impact of lighting, once we switch to LED lights, there's not a huge amount more that we can do other than turning off those lights when we leave the house. So we're not going to spend too much time on that because we're all about impact. All right. So now we're coming to the pointy end when I'm going to ask you guys to make a commitment within your own homes about what you could tackle feasibly after tonight's talk. What is it that's resonated for you? What is it, the thing that was like, oh, I do a bit of that. That's my problem. Nothing to feel embarrassed about. That's the opportunity right there. So if we were to do nothing else, the most impactful thing we could do would be to use less hot water in our homes. Because we know that our shower is sucking, a quarter of the, energy that's coming from our homes. So if we're going to be doing nothing else tonight, shorter showers in Wyndham. Looking at heating and cooling, thinking about your thermostat, thinking about fixing those drafts, tackling standby power as that vampire that's sucking money out of your wallet. And if you have a pool, thinking about how you manage your pool heating. So when we set any goals with sustainability, or to be honest, anything for life, the best thing we can do is think about what's going to have the highest impact and what's going to have the highest likelihood of success. If you said to me, Joe, the best thing I could do would be to get everyone in my household to have a shorter shower because they have 10-minute showers and we're always running out of hot water and it's a nightmare. But I've got zero hope of getting that over the line because my partner is just set in their ways, or my kids, it'll cause drama and it's just too hard. then perhaps that's not the most effective thing for you to tackle tonight. So I want you to think about it. Sometimes a good way to do that is to give your items a 1 to 5. Say, right, is it? You know, we certainly know that in terms of impact, there's our 1 to 5 right there. But if you put a likelihood score next to those and you said, oh, chances of getting light water use over the line is 5, and then you started reprioritizing them by timesing those scores together and choosing the one with the lowest score, then you can come up with a bit of a priority list. So I want to know what you are feeling your household is ready to tackle. Which of those 5 feels like something that you could start thinking about without spending a cent, and by starting to look at those behaviours and those opportunities within your home? Excellent. Great responses. And I'm going to finish in 3, 2, 1. All right. Well, it looks like the shower monologue has worked because a lot of you are going to tackle that shower, which is great because I'm about to use an example of how to do that. Some of you are going to start thinking about draught proofing. And I certainly know myself, I was living in a 1930s home quite recently. I've moved since, and it was a rental. And it was an amazing home because it was double brick. But my gosh, was it breezy. I could feel the air as I walked across. I could actually see holes through the beautiful floorboards where I could see underneath the house. And I can't tell you the difference it made for keeping some of that heat in the room during last winter, in particular during the lockdown that we were in, and obviously you guys were in for a lot longer. So draught proofing is really powerful and certainly makes our homes far more comfortable. I've got a question here from VJ saying, can we close off unused ducts, probably in an unoccupied room, without impacting the efficiency of ducted gas heating systems? Oh, look, VJ, that's probably a question for your provider, unless anyone else has got a thought. I completely have seen it happen. Whether that would actually reduce the amount of efficiency of the system, I cannot tell you. Certainly, obviously, it would stop it going out in that space, but I'm not sure whether it would overall reduce the emissions. It's certainly, if you have a system that can isolate rooms, which I know, is a pretty bougie kind of system to have, you can turn off certain rooms, and that's very smart, because you're right, there are areas of the homes which don't need to be heated or cooled if we're not in them. That might be one. I'm very happy to follow up offline and get back to you if that's helpful. And it's a great question, but whether just covering that up would reduce emissions, I'm not 100% sure. Feel free, if anyone's had any thoughts or ideas about that themselves, to share on the chat. All right, we're up to a little caption about habits. This is where I really come into my specialty area, ducted air conditioning, not it. I've worked for nearly 20 years in behaviour change. First of all, within hospitals and communities. I've worked in mental health. I've worked with people returning to work. I've worked in safety, and I've worked in environmental compliance, and then more recently sustainability. And it's all been about changing people's habits. Big, small, daily, monthly, hourly. And I know that when it comes to changing a habit, like a shorter shower, that there are things that work, and there are things that we're going to need to make it successful. Now, you might think, I am going to do this. I'm fine. I'm committed. I'm done. But if you live with someone else, and they are going to need prompts, and they're going to need a reminder to be part of this as well, because ultimately it's only going to work with more impact if you both do it, then this could be a really handy thing for you. So whenever, and it also might be what you need to prompt you to take an action that is set and forget as well, because it's all really well to think about one of the actions we've done, but unless we go away and do it, it's not going to make any difference. And we've got a lot of competing and conflicting demands in our lives. So how can you make sure when you leave tonight that you remember to go and make that change? So you might need to write on a post-it now a prompt for you for the time that you're going to actually be able to do it, which won't be probably tonight. So maybe it's tomorrow and you need to stick it on the fridge. But we respond to cues. So we respond to visual cues, hunger cues, sensory cues, noises, habitual cues, because of the time of day. We do things because we receive a cue. And when it comes to habits, we respond to those cues. So if we're trying to create a new habit when it comes to showering, we're going to need to give our family or ourselves a cue. And the most appropriate time to give them that cue is when they're in the space to do that habit. And if their habit is to turn on that shower and stay in there for 20 minutes and sing a song and scrub their back and shave their legs and brush their teeth and give themselves a facial and wash the cat, you are really going to struggle with getting them to go down to 3 minutes, because they're going to, it's not enough time to do my things in the shower. So the cue, when you need to then to start thinking about that, obviously after an initial conversation and discussion of the issue, is when they're going to have a shower. So as soon as they walk in that room, what's their cue to remind them that this is what you're doing? So their routine is something we need to factor as well. So my routine might be, I go in the shower and I do all these things. So you might need to rejig some of that routine. So it might be when we shower, we will turn the water off while we shave our legs. So it might be when we shower, we turn the egg timer that I have in the shower, which is a 3-minute timer, and we have a shorter shower. It might be when we shower, I turn on the shower radio to a 3-minute song, and that is my prompt for when it's time to get out. You need to have something that's embedded in your routine for at least 3 weeks, because we know that's when it's habit forming. And to be honest, probably a little prompt in the future as well to remind us, because something like showering is something that's pleasurable and enjoyable for most people, and we can slip. Or sometimes we think we're having a 3-minute shower and we actually think, wow, that is much closer to 7. Also thinking about rewards. If you're going to do something within your home that's going to make someone else sacrifice something or see it as a sacrifice, then what's their payoff going to be, other than just feeling good because they've reduced their money? Is it that you're going to use the money that you've saved from those showers for something? Is it that you're going to give them, is it their kids, so you're going to give them a reward chart for every time they have a short shower? Think about rewarding those behaviors, because if they're not really on board, it's going to take a little bit of pushing. And it might be a reward for yourself. When I've saved $100 from shorter showers, I'm going to spend it on X. We're going to talk about that in a second, because it's a very powerful thing you can do when it comes to emissions reduction and energy reduction, when it comes to saving money. There's a couple of answers, I think, there to the ducks, which is great. Hopefully they're helpful for BJ and Sharon. I am going to talk now a little bit about the other thing. If we're procrastinating about doing something, sometimes it means we need to break it down into smaller tasks. So if you say, I'm going to change the way I use hot water, that's very, very broad. So make it smaller. If it's, I'm going to have a 3-minute shower, great. And make it smaller. I am going to talk to my family on Monday about the 3-minute showers in our house. That's getting closer. I'm going to purchase on Tuesday, or borrow a 3-minute egg timer. Find one at the op shop, or get one from the neighbors. Break it down into small habits. Wednesday, I'm going to put the egg timer in the shower. On Thursday, I'm going to put the chart up with the rewards for the kids. Make it piecemeal, because we've got enough going on in our lives and things are hard enough. So they call that micro productivity, and it's a really great tool for procrastination. If you're struggling with a task and you write a to-do list and it's like reduce energy, that's too big for us to feel like that's something, and you'll just go, oh, that's too hard. So make it as small and step by step as you can, and it'll feel much more approachable and manageable. I'm going to say when it comes to rewards and when it comes to saving is that one of the really powerful things you can do when it comes to emissions reduction, if it's something you're passionate about, and you're obviously passionate enough to come on here on a Thursday night and listen to this talk, is that anything you save from the money on your electricity bills can be a potential reserve to spend on something else. So if you're not in a position to invest in LED lighting, but you can reduce some of the other expenses in your home by some of the activities we've talked about today, use your energy bills and your usage. And there's a great chat that Carolina talked about before about understanding your energy bills and making comparisons. Use that to work out how much you've been saving from your behaviors. You will need to do them over time and track it, and then use that money to set aside as a sort of reserve for you to reinvest in something else. Because the powerful thing about sustainability and efficiency measures, which is ultimately what sustainability is just using our resources more effectively and efficiently, is that it will save you money, and that money can go back into investing in something else, which saves you more money. And you will get to a point where your energy bills are a fraction of what you thought they ever could have been. So I would say it's really lovely to take yourself out to dinner to reward yourself for all your short showers. But think about what it is that your home needs. You know, is it that you need a pool blanket? Is it that you need to start thinking about solar panels? You know, is it that LED lighting is well overdue, and that's something that would just make a huge difference to your, you know, to 80% reduction in your lighting costs? Then that's what you should save for, and do it step by step. Replace one thing at a time, but save to spend and then spend to save. We're going to do it the other way. But sometimes you need to invest money in those next low cost and potentially higher cost items over time. And this is a really great way of forced saving. So make sure you track what you've saved on your bills, put it aside if you can, and call that your sustainability reserve or your energy emissions reserve, whatever it's going to be. And this is how a lot of organizations spend money on sustainability. They create a reserve that goes back into something, and once it's paid for itself and has reduced the costs, then it goes into saving something else. All right, hope you've followed me on the whirlwind. But I'd love to hear some questions. I've certainly got some resources here that you can check out. I have no affiliation with Craig Rucastle, but his book, as I was saying before, is very handy. Hopefully there's a copy at the library, because we're all about not spending a cent. But if you can get a chance to have a look at it, or go back and watch this series, it's a really powerful way of capturing those high impact things. Certainly your council is a really valuable source of materials, resources. You've got an advisory service, you've got other webinars you can check out. I've got this great book that I use quite a lot. It's they're about to release a 6th edition. This is a government resource. It covers everything from energy to water to waste. Again, if you're into this and this is something you want to pursue, there's so many resources out there. And certainly even the Australian government's energy page has a lot of tips and hints about how you can reduce your bills without spending money. Money's great, but certainly you can make a big impact without spending a cent as well. And I'm going to see if there's any questions. Can I please ask where there are electrical meters or usage measuring meters available? In terms of whether you're spending money on them, I tried to see if there was any. I don't know if Carolina can add any light on this, if there's any you can hire, because I know some councils or libraries have access to energy meters that you can tap into. But there's certainly ones that you can pick up, and I believe you can pick them up at hardware stores. but have a look online. They can start as little as $20. You can also get energy meters that tap into your smart meters, because I know that Victoria is wonderful having smart meters. We don't have those in New South Wales very much. So if you've got a smart meter, the data you can get from plugging an energy meter into that is quite amazing. And if you're really, really passionate about this, there's like the Rolls-Royce levels of energy meters which link with your phone, and you can look at your usage at any one time in real time. So, you know, there's ones that you can plug into appliances and just see what, you know, what they're using as well. So, yeah, as little as $20 hardware, and have a look.
Jo, I was just going to mention that in Victoria, we've got the Victorian Energy Upgrades program. I'll share the link to that. And I think there might be some rebates on monitoring devices there as well. So you can have a look there. Residents can have a look.
Great. All right. Where are we up to? We've got a question. Oh yeah, and VJ said there's some units you can get for free installation with power. Yep, power. Okay, that's great. Sharon's asked, can you get energy efficient globes for long fluorescent lights? Yes, you can. You can get LED globes that link into those. They're not as good as a whole, completely whole new light, but there are certainly more efficient versions of fluorescent lights that have a very similar look, sometimes slightly better than the old fluorescents as well. And all I would say to that, and am I right in saying that is that part of the energy efficiency upgrades, if someone was to look at that, Carolina, that they can get?
Yeah, and I've shared the link on the up here as well. So
that could be part of it. And making sure that your electrician or anyone who's doing that is registered through that, so you can get credits and discounts for that, and rebates. So that's great. Where have we got? PayPal free from the Victorian government. Brilliant. I think people have helped answer their own questions. Look, it's certainly been my pleasure this evening to have you all in my garage. This recording will be available if you want to share it with a family member or a friend or grandparent or your children. Please do. The link will be sent out with the slides. And thank you for taking interest in this. It's a really powerful and impactful and hopefully financially beneficial project to embark on. So I wish you all very much success with that, and certainly check out the other resources that are available. And if you'd like to follow us on social media or reach out to us for any further questions, very happy to help as well. But thank you so much for Wyndham City, and I'm very jealous. You guys are doing fantastic things. So well done, and yeah, good luck to your community and tackling your emissions too.
Thanks so much, Jo, and thanks everyone for coming along. We'll be sharing the slides and also a link to all the next presentations. Good night, everyone.
Thanks all. Have a great evening. Bye-bye.